Oh, I just got a notification. I don't know if you guys know this, but Richard Taylor TV is now live
Well,
on
there you
YouTube.
go. We are live. Hey,
Good to be
we
live.
got we got a bunch of people watching. I'm going to monitor the chat, so no curmudgeons get in there. Um, so we're going to talk about the legacy media issue. Well, it's not an issue, but the legacy media situation that's popping up with the new version of Final Cut Pro 10.4.4. But before we get into that, that's going to be the main subject today. Before we get into that, some of us were at the Creative Summit this year, so we're going to do a couple of highlights about that. So for me, going to Apple Campus is always absolutely a highlight. We get to see, Patrick, is it the Final Cut Pro Apps team, or what exactly do we see each time? I know it's Luke and Estelle, but
Yeah.
what exactly are they called?
I don't know what they're called, other than Luke,
Product-
Estelle.
Product something?
They're
They're
product
product
managers.
I think.
There you
Are
go.
their titles? Yeah.
Because I think I always call them the Final Cut Pro team, and they're not the team per se. They're involved, obviously, very heavily
Right.
with them. But they're the product managers. So they're more like the advertising arm of Final Cut Pro or something, or the promoters or whatever.
Something like that. Yeah, I mean, basically all I know is they show up and they talk about Final Cut at the Creative Summit and sometimes at Lossy Pug.
Absolutely.
And they are our friends. We like them. They are very nice
Absolutely.
people, and they advocate for us a lot. So we have advocates who, say, hey, it would be really helpful for the customers of Final Cut if it did this,
Right.
So it's nice to have them there representing us to Apple.
So on Friday, we went up to the Saratoga Country Club. That was a pleasant surprise. We had lunch.
We did have lunch, and we also had like mouthfuls of smoke.
Well,
Wow.
that was the whole weekend.
Yeah, that was.
That replaced the smoke from Armadillo Willie's. Right.
Oh man, is that what that was?
It must have been. We complained about it so much. They said, "Well, we'll give you some atmosphere the whole weekend that you're here." But anyway, so we didn't have lunch last year.
No, we
Remember,
didn't.
we
We
went to the
were
theater.
fending
Yeah.
for ourselves the entire time, weren't we?
Exactly. So that was a real nice surprise. And the actual presentation, there's Sam Messman from LumaForge, of course, did a presentation. Ben himself from FMC did a nice introduction.
I would say Sam did more of a speech, like he was rallying the troops. It was than a presentation. Was that fair, Patrick?
I'm sorry.
It was the LumaForge call to arms.
That sounds like Sam. Yeah.
He had the best line of anybody. He goes. He turned to the window and said, "The place is on fire." I love that. He did that twice. It was so good. He did it twice. So yeah, Sam was there. We had Roger Bolton from Coremount. We had Atomos. I'm not sure what the guy's name was. Jeremy.
That was Travis.
Travis. Okay.
Yeah, Jeremy's the CEO, I think, but yeah,
Okay.
Travis is the guy that represents the Americas, or at least Los Angeles area, I think. Anyway.
And we had Philip.
Oh yeah, Philip
from Lumberjack Systems talking about all the stuff. I don't know if I forgot anybody, but that was really nice. So that was really nice. The lunch and everything was right there. And then we got to go to the visitor center at the spaceship campus.
Well, let's back up a little bit. Who was our keynote presentation?
Well, iJustine, of course. You're new. I won't say it. I was going to say your new girlfriend, but I don't want to say that because
I'm a married man.
I know you are. That's why I didn't want to say. I was just teasing anyway. Yeah, iJustine was there, and I really thought she did a really good job. I mean, she's a Final Cut Pro editor from the old days, even though she's not that old, and now she's doing 10. She's doing it herself. She's not hiring people, as Brad said, as some of the YouTubers do. So she had some interesting timelines. They were kind of checkerboarded, and I'm not sure exactly what was going on with. It's hard to tell just from the screen, once on the screen. But what do you think, Patrick? What do you think about her?
I think Justine's okay. I'm having to gather on my thoughts because they're very, very positive. She's extremely smart. She's an intelligent businesswoman. She's a good editor. She knows how to create content that's engaging. She and her sister Jenna do a really good job of working together to create content for both of their channels. And, I think that she had a really good presentation. and she was afraid to show us her timeline, and then she showed us her timeline, and everybody that I've talked to said, my timeline looks like that. I don't know what she was worried about.
No, I don't either.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't either.
So
yeah,
and she's got almost a billion views on YouTube. So even if we didn't like her timeline, we could just shut up,
Well, exactly. No, the funny thing was when Jeff said, well, are you ever disappointed in some of your videos? And she said, yes. And he goes, well, what kind of numbers are you talking? She goes, a few 100,000. That's what she's disappointed in, because a lot of her videos get 1.5 million views. So she's doing something right. I mean, obviously she's a personality, which helps. Like none of us are personalities, are we?
I think Patrick's a personality.
I think all of us are. Speaking of personality, I want to introduce everybody to Isaac Taranez. Is that how you say your last name?
Or Taranez, like the dinosaur.
Okay, there you go. And so you're from the East Coast. Finally, I got somebody from the East Coast. You're from New York, right?
Yes, I'm in New York right now, yeah.
And just do a quick introduction of what you do in New York as far as Final Cut goes.
So, yeah, as far as Final Cut goes, I'm writing, I'm shooting, I'm cutting. I'm doing some motion graphics, VFX, so kind of like soup to nuts on that. And I've been working in post-production since 2001. I was supporting Avid products back in 2001, and I started using Media Composer in 2003. And I fought post-production for years because I'm at heart a technologist. So you see me gesturing to the left side of my brain right now. So when I'd hop on the forum and I'd see people easily freak out, I thought to myself, I don't want to be like one of those people. I want to, keep my grip on being able to separate the fact from emotion and troubleshoot stuff. But
well, that's one of the reasons I wanted you on today, specifically to talk about this legacy media thing that's going on right now. So we'll get into that in a few minutes, but I saw we were back and forth on the messaging today, and I said, well, I got to get you on and talk about some of that, some of the meat about it, some of the technical stuff that I'm not, I don't know everything about 32-bit versus 64-bit, so I have some questions. I'm not sure who can answer them, but we'll find out. So let's continue on with the summit a little bit, and then we'll get back to Final Cut Pro 10.4.4, and then we'll jump into the main topic, which is going to be legacy media for the time being. So, Brad, what did you think about the summit up to Friday? What did you think about it?
This summit was probably one that I got to participate a little bit more in, because the first year I was shooting interviews for the documentary that I went, which was 2016.
Right.
Then last year I was busy in my hotel room, like making changes and finishing what I was going to show on Saturday night at the Creative Summit. And then after I showed my movie at the Creative Summit, the next day I went to interview Dave Cerf to keep changing my movie, of course. So this year I felt like I got a lot more time to talk to people. I actually got to see a couple of the presentations. The main one that stood out to me was a presentation that a lady by the name of Storm did about captioning, and specifically about how moving forward we could make subtitles more dynamic and more involved for the deaf community, which was a fantastic presentation. And I was sitting next to like Mark Spencer was in there. And of course, if you know Mark, he actually has suffered some hearing loss in one of his ears. So it was interesting to see a lot of the people in the community. Jeff Greenberg was in there, and he had a similar comment that I would make, which was ever since he had, a baby and young kids, he watches shows at night and has to, turn down the volume. So he turns on the captions, and you start realizing how all over the place they can be and how not good they can be. So anyway, that's a big tangent on her presentation, but that definitely stood out. And the tips and tricks, it was a lot of fun. That was a riot. Patrick got up there and showed us a really clever way to quickly take a vocal EQ and invert it and apply it to music so that you could notch out the frequencies for voices, which is a technique. I don't know if Patrick wants to explain that a little bit more better than I just did, but
no,
it was fun.
Right.
It was a quick way to do that. And it started making me think, could you do, because you know how you can do a match EQ and then you can control the amount on the match EQ. It made me think maybe you could even take that to the next level and do some sort of match EQ and then invert the match EQ or something. But I'd have to experiment and see how that would work.
I would love to hear how that works, because everybody does have a different response, like EQ response with their voice.
Yeah.
So if you had the ability to notch it out for different people, then you could combine what I showed with what Fenwick showed and do a match EQ per section so that the music is always EQ'd perfectly to not compete with the voice of the person that's talking.
Right.
Yeah.
That would be pretty cool. That would be pretty cool.
Music producers have been using that for years because of the loudness wars. Everything is so loud. Everything's competing. Snare drum is the same frequencies as the guitar, as the human voice. So you have to notch things out. It's exactly what we've been doing for a long
one
time.
that made us all kind of go, oh, I'd say most of us, and I don't know if Patrick already knew this one, but one of the tips that I thought was really clever, and randomly, like the next day I was looking at documentation for something else, and I saw the exact thing they were talking about. But if you open your effects browser and you're previewing the effects, you can basically skim over the effects and you can preview it on your video clip. You know what I'm talking about? Anyone?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So if you hold down Option while you're doing it, you can control the amount that effect is applied. And if you apply it, it'll actually save that setting. So you can preview it before you even apply and control. And it's just like from the documentation I was looking at, it's whatever the primary, usually it's amount if it's like a stylized look or something. So it's whatever the primary function is can be adjusted before you even apply effect, which is pretty insane. And that was one I think even Steve Martin was like, what? I didn't know that. Like we were all like, whoa. So those tips and tricks things, there's a wealth of knowledge in that room, and a lot of people know a lot of different little nuances and things about Final Cut. And I think
absolutely
that's the benefit of going to something like a Creative Summit, is you kind of have this knowledge pool to draw from, because it's a pretty in-depth application and not everybody does the same things with it all the time. And sometimes we take a slower path than we need to.
Yep. So people were talking, I did a few live streams from the summit, and people were saying, are you disappointed that 10.4.4 came out Thursday morning? And Friday, I wouldn't say I was disappointed, but it was kind of anticlimactic. But then Saturday happened.
Well, okay, let's talk about Friday real quick, because I have two feelings about that. Would it have been more exciting for them to drop 10.4.4 like at the presentation they gave us? I think I would have been more excited at first, but I will say that the presentations that they did, specifically the workflow case study that they did showing off the features, that, and of course, if you weren't there, you're like, what is he talking about? But that actually was really good stuff. Like when they first just said, here are the new features, we're like, yeah, I know, I've read all about them. But then when it actually came to like, here's a real world, thing, and they actually showed a project that the Pro Workflow team has been putting together, that was more interesting to me. And Emery actually got up and did a presentation showing off his workflow extension, and it was really cool to see them talk about that, because it's one thing to get the news, it's another thing to kind of see an in-depth, this is how it actually works and here's all the features.
Absolutely.
So I was happy on Friday. Anybody else? I guess Patrick, were you a little bummed out? Probably not.
Nah, it was fine.
No, I didn't. Like I said, I wasn't disappointed, but it was a little bit anticlimactic compared to last year until we got to Saturday. And then something happened on Saturday that made this summit equal to last year's, if not better.
Man, you're making me miss it, y'all. That's a real bummer.
No, Isaac, you were there last year, and you got to see the debut of 10.4. That was the exciting part last year.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. So this year
you're talking about the thing that we can't really talk about what was said, but we can say that we were in the room.
Yes,
you can acknowledge the existence of it. Yes.
Yes. No,
Isaac, do you know what we're talking about? Maybe you can.
I do know about the existence of this event. Yes.
Well, the event was public. It was on the
On the
you know,
itinerary.
Final Cut Pro Creative Summit website listed. So the actual event is not secret
Right.
because that was public.
Yes.
But they did ask us to not
No,
share.
no,
what we're-
absolutely. Absolutely. We were not allowed. They asked us not to share anything.
Okay, so what does it say on the schedule so that
It
we word
says,
this right?
I'm going to pull it up right now so everybody can see it. Screen share.
And to be clear, if there's anybody with Apple watching this broadcast, I know nothing. I wasn't there and I know nothing. So everybody's been true to whatever they've signed.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I also
well,
know
we
nothing.
didn't
I don't
sign
know what
There-
anyone's talking about.
There it says it right there at 12-1, Apple Pro Videos app panel and discussion.
Yeah.
So that's all we really can say.
I think I can carefully say one thing, which was I thought it was going to be a session where Apple would just get up and not answer our questions, and it was quite the opposite. And I'll also say we don't know anything secret about what Final Cut's going to do. They didn't make any future announcements. I think is that safe? That's about all I'm going to say about it, because they did ask us to be respectful, to not video it, to not blog about it. I would love for in the future for them to do something like that and allow somebody like Peter Wiggins to draft up an article that is Apple approved before it goes out, because it's great to see the Apple Pro Apps team connect with their users and be very open and honest about the process of making software that we love.
Well,
And,
one of the things
and I think that's all I'm going to say. And Richard,
one of the things that was stated was this event was specifically for this audience live at the Creative Summit.
Mhm.
It was not. It's not. This is just like a highlight for us. So, specifically was Patrick. What do you think about that? Just generically.
Generically, it was great.
I think so too. It was a highlight for me. I guess that's my point. Friday was really, really good, but like since we already had 10.4.4 that was released the day before, it was a little anticlimactic. But then Saturday came, and I had seen this a couple weeks before the event, and I was questioning because it disappeared off the schedule. Then it came back again. Then it was there again. So that was And
what we've seen is a trend of a little bit more trust. Apple's it tries to be a secretive company, even though I feel like all the iPhone stuff leaks really early. But they want users to be surprised by their products, so they don't want a lot of misinformation about things to leak out before. They want to control the message. Right. But with the pro video world, it is really important, I think, because these are professional clients that their livelihoods depend on products. It's good to connect with them. And what I think we've seen in the last three years or so is more openness. And I don't know if the closed offness started because 10 was so poorly received or not. But starting with like the FCP Exchange at NAB and IBC doing FCPX Tour or FCPX World, things like that, we've seen them engage more and more in the community. And then in 2016 at NAB, we had the NDA preview of what was going to be 10.3, which I was at that event.
Did you have to sign a paper for that?
We signed an NDA, and then we had to keep our mouths shut until they... and that was a big thing. I think they showed it to like a couple hundred people because it was 2 days. They showed it one day and then they showed it the next day. And so, there was a good number of people who kept their mouths shut. And I think that slowly they're just warming up to being a little bit more open to the community. I think the other thing to understand too is we talked about Luke and Estelle's product managers. There's and Steve Bays, I think you'd mentioned his earlier this on one of your shows has retired. Right. So it's not a huge. That's not a specific. The designers and engineers is a huge team of people Apple working on it, but as far as the marketing side, it's not a huge team. So it would be over. I think they're already overwhelmed with how much work they have to do. So anyway, that's just me making an assumption. I could be totally wrong on that, but I think people that should understand that Apple's making an effort to connect with us more, and there's a building of trust with the community, and this is another one of those examples that was great. Like Patrick said, it was great. And maybe that's what I should just say.
It absolutely
shut
was
up.
great. But I don't want to give the impression that the same people were there the entire weekend, at least on, Friday and Saturday. They were there just mingling with the crowd, talking to people one-on-one and things. But the panel discussion was nice. That was really nice. It was specifically for the attendees of the FCPX Creative Summit. It was stated that's what it was for. That's exactly what it was for. It's not meant for public consumption at that point. But I think everybody that went to that has nothing but praise about it. So anyway, we'll get off of that so we don't get in any trouble. Anything else about the Creative Summit? Patrick, how was your presentation? Did you feel it went over well? I got to see half of it because Serena was doing it at the same time. So I split my time between hers and yours.
Yeah. Well, I think everyone gets really excited and thrilled by the idea of talking about comparing different forms of RAW footage and talking about the difference between how RAW and log is used inside of Final Cut Pro 10.
But I do. I mean, I am absolutely fascinated with RAW. So I'm looking to get a camera that records it.
I say that. I think it was 45 people show up to the room.
Nice.
Nice.
Yeah. So, I feel good about the attendance. It was one of the better attended sessions, is what I've been told. And that feels nice, but also, there were a number of faces that just kind of were very blank. I felt like people came for the flamethrower footage, and then I started talking about debayering and tone mapping and all this other stuff, and
the secret is just leave it, let it do its default thing.
Yeah, I think
Final Cut will take care of you.
I should start focusing more on very practical ways in which people can use that information, as opposed to getting into the esoterical, like here's what it actually is.
Photo sites, more green than red and blue.
Yeah, I mean, all that stuff is interesting to someone like me who likes to know how things actually work. But, the people that create...
Save it for the reduser.net forum, Patrick.
Yeah, save it for the reduser.net forum. That's exactly right. Yeah, Creative Summit, I should have done a little bit better of a job in terms of focusing on practical usage. But, people
flamethrower footage is very practical usage. And actually, I don't mean that totally facetiously, because... if you want to test the dynamic range of RAW versus log, I mean, get in a dark room and fire off a flamethrower. That's a practical usage.
That's very
Patrick,
true.
I think that people were expecting a live flamethrower. That's why they may have been having blank faces.
They were like, he's not going to bring out the real flamethrower?
I thought he was going to do the jellyfish barbecue in there. And that's why the flamethrower was there. So,
oh man, I mean, people did seem to be engaged, and people did seem to enjoy it. I only heard positive things afterward, but I was very afraid that I was getting lost in the weeds just to air my own insecurities in front of a live audience.
Right. And he's also on a toilet right now, everyone.
No, I'm not. No. Oh. I'm back.
There you go. So, what do you guys think about the 10.4.4 update? Did you have anything special that you particularly liked?
I liked the ability to just immediately import flamethrower footage without having to think about. No,
the flamethrower plugin.
Yeah, the flamethrower plugin was great. I was really excited. I think for the workflow extensions, I think that opens up a brand new world of possibilities for third-party developers. So, I mean, and especially, did you guys have you played around with the Frame.io plugin at all yet? The Frame.io extension?
Yeah. I got to use it with the client almost immediately after it launched, and it was awesome.
Yeah, I think my favorite thing about the Frame.io extension is the fact that you can pull footage from Frame.io at whatever resolution you want, and then within the Frame.io extension, you can say, you know what, actually, I want to change which quality I'm using. So you can actually do a conform to either a different level of proxy, or you can conform back to the original. So Frame.io has built for us the ability to remotely do whatever proxy size we want without having to break the proxy system inside of Final Cut.
Wow. Nice.
Patrick, does that proxy, Frame.io proxy thing, does that work when you're not in Frame.io? Can you replace like the proxies that are existing in Final Cut?
Well, what I'm saying is that Frame.io, you upload your original footage to Frame.io. It generates 4 or 5 different flavors of proxy.
I see.
Then you ingest it back into Final Cut at whatever proxy level you want, and then you can flip over to the original at any time. It's really mostly helpful if you're working with somebody remotely. Less of building it for yourself, but if you're sending footage, like Brad, if you wanted to send Alan or Richard footage for the documentary, you could have put the originals on Frame.io, and then they could have pulled them down at a lower resolution, worked on them, and then conformed back to the original when it was time to do the assembly of the full timeline.
I would need more Frame.io storage, but yes, absolutely.
Yeah, you would need significantly more Frame.io storage, and that is the one downside to it right now, is that you do have to.
Although Emery did
storage.
Emery did. I think they are. Didn't they do something with their free plan and they're changing their storage options? I don't know. I don't know when the announcement's coming or what's happening, but I think that that's
no longer a free plan, from what I understand.
That's what it was. But I think they're going to be changing some of their storage plans, is what a little bird told me. I don't know what that means, but
yeah, exactly. You don't
probably still won't get the 5 or 6 terabytes I would want, but it'll be a step in the right direction.
Yeah, it's got to be affordable for like 1 and 2 man shops as well as bigger clients. So that's
I think Frame.io always has been. It's just how you've been using it. The workflow Patrick's talking about is really where we need to go, and I think Frame.io is building that. But what Frame.io has been for me for years is a quick way to upload a video and get feedback from clients, and for that you don't need a lot of storage. You just need a 720p or even lower res in some cases file, depending on what you're at what stage you're at. So I mean I am a little bit of a fan of Frame.io. I don't know if anybody noticed the shirt I'm wearing.
Yeah, there you go.
Can you see it?
There you go.
There?
Yeah,
there. This is how I'm going to do the rest of the interview, by the way.
There you go.
So,
how much are they paying you, Brad? How much are they paying you?
I actually threw this on this morning and wasn't even thinking about the fact that I was doing the live show. And then I sat down in front of there and I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. I also, during the Creative Summit, was wearing this and I was telling people that I worked for Frame.io and then giving them bad advice. And no, I didn't do that.
Come on, Brad.
It was kind of cool. We had, speaking of the Creative Summit, there was a huge crowd of people from Frame.io. My understanding is like everybody who
people or something, right?
Yeah, everybody who worked on the workflow extension, I believe. So it wasn't just marketing people, which I normally see at events. They actually had their software engineers and people out there, and it was fun to get to know them and talk to them. And so they're all wearing their Frame.io stuff, and I felt like I could just slip into the group and be like, "Yeah, you haven't met me. I sit across from you. No, been working there for years."
Yeah, Brad, that's only convincing if you happen to know the layout of their office.
I do know the layout of their office. I've been there.
Oh, that's why it's convincing for you. I tried.
So, anyway. Right, we did when they hosted the screening of Off the Tracks in October in New York.
In New York, right?
Which I didn't see Isaac at. I was going to mention you're in New York, Isaac, and you didn't come to my free screening. That makes me a little sad.
I know. Well, I'm 2 hours north of the city, so it's a little bit of an event.
Oh yeah, that would have been a trip.
Yeah,
and you'd seen it, and yeah, I get it. I totally get it.
But hey, I think the great thing that came out of all of this is that we know that Brad is really good at laying it on thick and giving a good guilt trip. Well,
I've been watching Brad, do presentations since the very first one he did it. I think it was NAB.
Was it NAB 2017? Was that the first time you presented?
Yeah. I mean, that's the first time I remember we did a preview at that when you were across the street from the convention center, LumaForge.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. I mean, it wasn't the first public presentation I've done, but probably the first one in the Final Cut community. Right. And that wasn't really a presentation because it was like, hey guys, I made a movie about Final Cut. Let's hit play. So,
Right. Yeah.
Well,
you
I
took
mean,
Q&A
to
at
be
the end.
fair, there was a decently long Q&A afterward,
mhm.
and everybody soliciting you with their ideas of how you should fix it or
Oh,
not
Right.
fix it or change it or add more of them. Specifically,
no.
Fenwick, right? That was Fenwick's big
Chris
deal.
Fenwick wants more of him. Patrick wants out of the film. So I balanced it and I didn't give Chris what he wanted, and I didn't give Patrick what he wanted, because that's what a true director does.
Yeah,
It's-
it's absolutely.
That's only just and fair, is to give neither person what they want.
All Patrick needs is it's great. It's great.
It's great.
Right.
That's-
So
that's my entire thing on Off the Tracks. Oh, it's,
Rob Mills in the
great.
chat says Brad is after free storage from Frame.io. That's why he's wearing the shirt.
That's right. That's right.
No, when I did a live stream from the exhibit night on Friday, and Patrick was too busy. I couldn't get to him. Sam was too busy, and so was Philip Hodgetts doing. So I couldn't get to any of those.
Well, they
Well, you
were
didn't-
working.
That's what I mean. They were busy working, and I didn't want to interrupt them. But I did
Yeah.
get to Brad and a bunch of other people, including
Yeah, but
iographer guy. What's the iographer's guy's name? I forget his name.
Dave.
I needed to
Solto.
talk to
Yes.
him.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if there's a trade-in program for iographer, because I don't have a 7 Plus anymore, and my understanding is the new iographer can fit multiple sizes.
Yes, it's spring-loaded.
So-
it looks really, really cool. I got one on the way.
I needed to talk to him, and I didn't get over to that booth, and I regret that. But yeah, I like my iographer for my 7, but now I have a 10S and it doesn't fit.
Yeah.
So we got to fix that. I'm
Yeah, I
trying
think
to get all sorts of free stuff on this
Yeah.
show.
Well, Dave Pasolto, I think iographer just came out with a multi-case that's supposed to
Yes,
work.
that's
for,
the one he's talking
That's
about.
what we're talking about. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's I've seen it. It's spring-loaded, so there's different widths, and even with the case, it can work. So it's spring-loaded. You push it in, and it goes back up into clips. It loads and unloads very quickly. Takes different sizes, width, length, and with cases. So it's a really good idea.
That is a really good idea.
So Isaac, what features in 10.4.4 that you really like specifically?
Yeah, second that on the workflow extensions. Really, really looking forward to video noise reduction. And I saw some cats posting some tests and some ABs, against Neat Video, and it's pretty awesome. It really holds its own, and yet they, abstracted away the complexity of making that happen. I thought, really good tip, going back to, something T. Payton has always thrown out there, is you treat those as VFX shots, and if you can't export those and then bring them back in, otherwise, you'll be eating up all that time in rendering.
Right.
Yeah, but yeah, I'd say that. And there was one more on the tip of my tongue, and it just totally left me. But yeah,
Well, I really like the dual screen timeline comparison when you can compare two
the
shots.
comparison viewer.
There you go.
Yeah.
Because it's from the
There you go.
timeline. It's not from the browser in the timeline. It's from the timeline. I really like that.
yes.
Yeah, well, and I like too with the comparison viewer that you've got the ability to save frames from wherever in the timeline or
Right.
another project even,
Right.
and you're able to reference it throughout, which is really, really helpful.
Absolutely.
Yeah, there was somebody at ILM that was writing about taking a scene from a film and recutting it, and I guess it must. And I'm the title escapes me, but it's I think it's called Noises Off or Sound Off. Noises Off. Todd Vaziri, if you're out there, don't hurt me. But it sounds like this feature might have been helpful to him, with this experiment, this timeline comparison.
Right. So that was my favorite. So
Cool.
about
Well, you were talking about, okay, well, earlier there's two things. One, you said you've been watching my presentations, but this year you flew home early and did not watch my presentation. But I was on the last time slot on the last day. So I had a few people show up, but I think pretty much everyone was either gone or tired or, out to dinner or something. But I gave a presentation, and this ties into 10.4.4. I gave a presentation on how to deliver your movie to iTunes, or I think the full title was How to Navigate Self-Publishing to iTunes. Jeff Greenberg and I worked for half an hour on that one. Anyway, and when they did the update, I was actually like, oh, wow, actually I can add some information to my slides One of them was noise reduction, because I was talking about picture quality control checks. And so it's like, hey, now you can use the noise reduction. And then another one, we were talking about captioning, and specifically foreign language translation, which I know a lot of people talk about using like rev.com or things like that. In the case of a longer form documentary, specifically a niche one about video editing software, I wanted to make sure that it got translated in a way that other video editors could understand and that they were using the right terms. And so for example, I had Felipe Baez translate Off the Tracks into Portuguese, and I hired another friend who is an editor down in Mexico to do it in Spanish, and then one of my sponsors, Archiware, is in Germany, and he had his son who's doing some film stuff translate it. And 10.4.4 fixes a problem we were having, which is you can now import and export .srt files. And what's nice about a .srt file is you can open it up in a text editor, and it's great for handing it off for a translator. So that's one of those things that probably is overlooked by some people, but I think they touted it more. I think Apple is touting it more as a good thing for social media. For example, if you're really cheap and don't want to pay anybody for captions, you can upload your video to YouTube. YouTube does an automatic poor man's translation to captions. You can pull that SRT down, bring it into Final Cut, clean it up, and then replace it onto YouTube. So there's a workflow for free built into Final Cut with this .srt. So lots of applications there.
Yeah, I've actually already put that to use in terms of like generating captions within Final Cut, like especially because we sometimes do content that's under 5 minutes, and so it's actually pretty easy for me to go through and just add the captions inside of Final Cut, and that way all I have to do is type the things out, and then I can very quickly upload the video file and the SRT, and I don't have to. This is a thing that's kind of weird that frustrates me, is that anytime I want rev.com to do the captions for a video, I have to set it to unlisted, which means I can't set it to be a scheduled video. And with as much content as we do, I like to schedule our videos for launch. And when I do the captions inside of Final Cut, I can automatically schedule it as opposed to setting it unlisted and then having to make it public by hand.
Nice.
Which I know that's very distribution heavy and not Final Cut heavy, but Final Cut enables me to do that. So,
well, and beautiful thing .srt again, platforms like I have Off the Tracks on VHX, and they accept .srts, and if which I have found typos and little mistakes in my captioning on Off the Tracks, because that's what I do every night. I go home and watch my movie with captions on and check them. But over time, I've randomly encountered little typos and things, and now it's a really quick fix to replace it, whereas it was more steps before. So these little workflow things do enable us to do more. And I know we've been talking a lot about .srts, workflow extensions, comparison viewer, batch exporting. I think we should go to batch exporting next, but those are all probably sexier topics. Has anybody been using batch exporting? That wasn't a feature anybody was asking for, I know.
No, not at all.
I'd been asking for it for years and I haven't used it yet. Like a jerk, But, to be fair, the scenarios in which I needed it the most were when I was working on documentaries and we had 10 acts of a show and I had to export all 10 acts as an assistant editor. So if I'd been able to select 10 different projects at once and hit export, that would have been great. Right now we're working on a video at a time. And the only other situation in which batch export would really be handy is if we were working remotely with somebody on dailies, and we aren't right now.
Right.
So I haven't used it yet. But I think that it definitely has a lot of potential and a lot of things that it will help a lot of people right now. Have any of you used it, Isaac, Brad, Richard?
I haven't had the need for it yet, but the day is coming, and it's good to know that it's there. So.
Absolutely. And then the trick is, if you want to export all the clips in your timeline, There's a trick to do that, right? Does anybody know that?
You create a compound clip of each clip.
No.
Make
No,
a
how
smart
do you do it?
collection of used media for that project.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that was shown
Oh.
during the tip show. I forgot about that.
Right.
Yep.
And then export, then you can batch export just the clips. Now, it would be nice, we're never satisfied, are we? We get batch exports, but it'd be nice if we could add handles.
Yes.
So
Well,
maybe
of
that's-
course.
And
It's
just
coming.
be able to select clips from the timeline and just batch export those out. But
Right.
it's what they've got there. There's ways like that little trick with the smart collection is brilliant.
Yes.
What are you grateful for today, gentlemen?
Exactly. That's
It was
what I
just
mean.
Thanksgiving.
Well, and
Exactly.
you were talking, yeah, and you were talking, Patrick, about have you used it yet? I haven't done much of anything since the Creative Summit as far as video stuff, but I am gearing up to put up multiple like clips onto Facebook and YouTube from off the track. So I'm going to just take like 30-second to 2-minute sound bites. And I've already got them all marked up, and so batch exporting is going to save me a ton of time when I want to send out 15 different clips. I won't be uploading them all at once, but to be able to just export all of those all at once and have them in there is going to be fantastic.
And then even the timeline window that they did, it's just not a normal timeline window. I mean,
the time code
window. Yeah, it's not a normal one, is it? They went above and beyond and did more to it. And first off, you can color. It'll choose the roll color, so you got different colors in there if you choose clips.
the source time code.
Yeah.
Source time code, right?
The thing that's really cool to me about that is, there are other apps that have multi-track source time code that can play back at once, but it's playing back. It's static, right? You've always got the same number of tracks, and so it's always playing back the time code of whatever clip is in that track at the time. I guess with Final Cut, it's functionally not significantly different, but you do have the ability to play back, and it will dynamically add and remove tracks. I say tracks, add and remove
rolls,
clips, and rolls as they get added. And it's not just a single. So if you've got multiple clips of the same roll, it shows all of the sources at once, but it's showing you all of the different layers simultaneously, and then it'll subtract dynamically. And did you guys see that you can actually copy the time code of everything at once and paste it?
Yeah,
Oh,
you can. That's what I was gonna mention, is you can actually copy it out of there.
Yeah,
I didn't
that's
realize
pretty
that.
sexy.
That's pretty darn neat. I did not know that. Now, if you can there's a couple of things that would make that time code window.
Wait,
handier.
make sure you say something grateful, then your criticism. Patrick is training us on this.
It's not a criticism. I'm the one that brought up how much better it is than a normal time code window, like the ones we've had. The third party plugin, I'm not sure who put it, FC. Somebody had one you could just a floating time code window in there, but this one's better.
Was that Cormelt? I think
No, I don't
FX
know.
Factory.
FX Factory, I think it
one.
was. Yeah.
Oh, right.
See,
Cormelt did the source time code, but it was an effect.
Yeah.
Right.
Plus,
Right.
I think they had one that had to take it off because it was problematic. But like in Logic, you have a gigantic floating time code window because a lot of times you got to be across the room and you got to be monitoring time code. So in Logic, you had that for years. So that's really cool. So why don't we get on to this legacy media, which is what I think a lot of people want to discuss. I'm gonna bring up the actual article first. Here we go. Start screen share. Is that backwards?
No,
there
for
we
me.
go. There we go. So legacy media in Final Cut Pro. This has caused, I would say, some issues on social media, which is not unusual when Final Cut Pro or Apple does something new. I remember, way back when the iMac dropped the floppy drive, people were in outrage about that. Of course, now we couldn't care less. So,
Right.
I'm sure everybody's read this article, right?
Yeah.
I've not read it from top to tail.
I
Well,
just
basi-
did.
Just to be honest.
There you go.
Just now.
Oh, there it is. All right, hey,
So-
there it is.
Well, there's a couple of things. They say to back up your project, of course, finish Final Cut Pro projects with legacy media. Okay, well, if you have hundreds of Final Cut Pro projects, that's not really practical. I think, some of these things I'm presuming. I think if you optimize the media for a given project, it'll take care of this issue. I presume that. What do you guys think?
You have to make sure to not delete your optimized media, because sometimes when you're archiving stuff or moving events to new libraries and stuff, you have the option to uncheck that. So yeah, optimized media should help, but a lot of times you are consolidating your library down.
Yeah, and you might delete your optimized. You know what? It would be so great if in Final Cut you could batch export clips.
Yeah. Wait a minute.
There you go.
So
Well,
If
we're
I-
laughing, but it's it's 7 years, almost 8 years.
So I will say this: at least this is a warning, and they're letting people know probably a year or two in advance that this is something to prepare for. I know it's causing an uproar, but it's not as bad as, say, the transition from 7 to 10, where something was just killed off.
Right.
Completely.
In the words of Steve Martin, this is a dissolved and not a hard cut, right?
Yeah, they're doing the cross dissolve, not the hard cut.
Well,
So
yeah.
so they're definitely preparing people. Now, the thing that baffles me is the Cineform HDCam SR. I'm like, but and I know Cineform, wasn't that on GoPros and stuff like that?
Yeah.
Correct,
And,
yeah.
and it's one of the mezzanine codecs that works best in Premiere.
And
But
Premiere, yeah.
but Premiere's also getting rid of 32-bit codec support.
Well,
Right?
shouldn't this be mentioned that this is? I mean, in the thing, it's saying this is an operating system decision.
Right.
It
So there's-
absolutely
this
is.
Right.
isn't
So this
necessarily-
is like an AV
I-
foundation. If your app relies on us to be able to play back video, then forget using it in Mac OS, right? You're gonna have to write your own.
Yeah. So
playback
so
engine.
I think this will affect users of all NLEs, not just Final Cut. And it also, I think, if people are spewing hate at the Final Cut team, I don't think it was their decision. I mean, I don't know that, but I
No.
don't believe
No,
it
no,
was.
this is-
I think
no,
this
that's
is a
an OS.
Apple's decision.
Right.
And I'm sure the pro apps people are like, we need to let people know now about this, so it doesn't, so at least we can get over this pain now. The one that is big to me, because HDCam SR is, I mean, it was big over a decade ago for very high-end television in Hollywood. And Cineform, like I said, it was on GoPros and it was a good codec for Premiere, but I've never used it at all. But the Avid codecs, I know that like all Hollywood movies rely on those Avid codecs. So now
Right.
the question is Avid not just going to not be using Final Cut? Are they going to be completely, switching over to Windows machines or something? I don't know.
Well,
Yeah, well, I
it's-
mean, there are a few things to
or just
consider there.
or just stay on their old Macs, which they do anyway.
it's not just the media;
It's the app itself.
Right.
it's
But
the app itself.
That's because Avid's been 32-bit forever. They haven't rewritten their
I
engine.
I had no
Right.
idea that was the case. I mean,
Yeah.
that's part of the problem. First off, as Brad said, they're giving us a year advance notice. At least a year. I do not update my OS when it first comes out. I'm still not on Mojave. I probably won't be on Mojave until sometime in 2019. So that's over a year. From what I understand, matter of fact, Isaac can talk about this because I know he's involved with Avid in New York. A lot of the Avid systems are years behind in the OS. Is that right,
Oh,
Isaac?
easily. I mean, I know of some who are still cutting on, Mountain Lion with
Right.
and everything has to be in this very specific combination of OS, Media Composer, and then if you have external video hardware, then you have to find the right driver for that. And then if you are trying to monitor that coming out of your video hardware and you're using, say, After Effects, and you want to monitor your comp out of that, all of this stuff needs to come together. And if someone is the post-production IT supervisor or whatever the role that they call themselves, they're not just going to jump into macOS 10.15, So I think even the way that those dialogues are framed, or how this support note is framed, it's like it's for a future Mac OS, but you still don't know if that's Death Valley or 10.16. So there's some time, and I think I don't know how much lead time they give developers, but there is a deck out there from 2013 that all the way back WWDC 2013 that says, hey, the AV Foundation is coming, and the QuickTime APIs, and that's the thing to clarify. It's not the containers, it's not the MOVs, the things that we commonly rely upon or look at as files, but it's the essence, it's the guts and the underpinnings. Those are going away, right? That sound right to you, Patrick? And
yeah, well, I mean, QT-Kit's already been done away with. That already happened. Yeah, right. QT-Kit was already deprecated like 2 years ago, 3 years ago, something like that.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, it really does come down to, there is a certain point at which backwards compatibility inhibits the ability to move forward with efficiency and with technology updates in general. So, a lot of people, I don't know if you guys have seen this, but I've seen on the forums a lot of people saying, oh, this is a power play by Apple to try to, steal from Avid or from Premiere or whatever and kill, put the final nail in the coffin for Avid. But that's not the case.
Exactly.
It's really about, if we're going to continue to improve people's lives and make things faster and easier for them, at some point, our operating system is going to have to be only 64-bit from beginning to end. We're sacrificing a lot of performance for the sake of people who have not updated their code.
Absolutely.
And so this is Apple saying, hey, it's time to update your code. And actually, the thing to note is that Avid is, they've already mentioned that they're working on rebuilding Avid from the ground up from a code standpoint. So it sounds as though Avid is currently making a 64-bit version of the application that is anticipated to be out, I think, next year. I think it's in beta. I think I've heard that it's in beta.
I just sent a link in our little group chat to Scott Simmons' article about Avid or talking about this last NAB. They talked about rewriting Avid.
Yeah, it's about time. It's about time.
Yeah,
it's been 20 years.
It absolutely
it's about
is.
Time.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, Apple did Final Cut Pro almost 8 years ago, and they did Logic before that. They rewrote both of those major pro apps. But Tom Walsky had a great comment. He was having to do with that article, the Final Cut Pro Apple support article about the legacy media, and one of the discussions on Apple. And he said, look, this has been known for years before now that Apple's going to 64-bit. It's not even 1 year. They've known about it for years prior to this. They've made an announcement they're going 64-bit. So this is not a surprise. And the 1 year from now, plus or minus, nobody's making you update your OS. And as Isaac said, many of these Avid installations are years behind. So they're not going to be affected. You're having a year's notice. Now, I'm not dismissing it and saying that carte blanche, that everybody should just do what Apple says. I'm not saying that. So it does cause problems for some people.
Right. Well, and the other question I had.
Nintendo was 64-bit in 1995. For crying out loud.
There you go. There you go. A perfect example.
Well, one thing I was going to say, I guess a little bit of confusion for me, and maybe we can talk about this. Compressor is now 64-bit finally. Right. And it should be noted, before it was like a 32-bit app, but it would run this Pro Transcoder. Like if you looked at Activity Window, when you ran Compressor, it'd run Pro Transcoder, which was 64-bit. So it's not like you were never getting any multi-core performance out of Compressor, but it was running like this kind of secret behind the scenes app. Now Compressor's been rewritten for 64-bit, but as part of that announcement, Apple said that they will still be supporting certain encoding of certain of their own 32-bit codecs, is what I remember. So what are those codecs moving forward, and why are they being supported while these other codecs are being killed off?
But it's not a codec specific, is it though?
Well, I don't know. I'm just saying the announcement says these are the codecs these are the formats that aren't going to be supported: Cineform, DNxHD.
Right.
I don't know why we've got a
Richard,
terminal for
I see
Richard.
where you're going there. I see what he's doing there. You're gonna fire up the line that about the legacy codecs, yeah.
And this is thanks to Charlie Austin.
Shout out Charlie Austin.
Charlie Austin. So if you, I'll put this in the chat. If you type in this line of code into terminal and press the return button, look what pops up.
Oh, look at that.
Apple's Cinepack, Motion JPEG, PNG, video graphics, TGA, TIFF, component video, JPEG 2000. Oh, JPEG 2000.
Pixlet makes me sad. Pixlet makes me sad.
JPEG 2000 is the is DCP. I use that all the time.
2000 is DCP.
Well, so are these all being killed, or are these still being supported? But
these are legacy, according to what's installed on your system, installed legacy video codecs in terminal. Once again, this is Charlie Austin. I got it from him on Twitter.
Right, but these are not the ones that have been announced that are being killed.
No,
not necessarily in that note, but this is a pretty good indicator of what you can expect to go away.
Yeah,
right.
I think it's in that note because those are codecs that people do use on a regular basis. Right. I have not used H.261 or 263 or Cinepack or JPEG A, B, C, D, or whatever. I've not used any of those, I think, ever.
And that's what's really great about that Digital Rebellion post is John Chappell talks about, if someone, Apple's not supporting the extensibility, that's the message. But if you had to, you could write, a developer could write their own parser, and FFmpeg, of course, is around that supports all these codecs from way back. Now, I'm not saying that's like maybe the ideal for some of these vendors, but like we've been talking about, that's the reality that everybody's facing right now, because to move forward, to make progress, there are things that have to go away. And it's not like Apple hasn't been talking about this in different circles for years,
No, absolutely. You're absolutely correct.
Which I don't presume to speak for Apple. That's just based on, what's known, or what I've seen out there.
Right. So one of the other things that we can do, and that I intend to do to take care of this problem, is to keep, first off, you can make a clone of your OS that works right now to boot off your current machine. But the other thing is to boot off of legacy.
What do we got here?
Oh my gosh.
Is this a 2C? No.
Welcome to Macintosh. Oh my gosh. I don't think that's even 32-bit, right? That's maybe 8-bit.
How many bits is it then?
It's
Never
probably
trust a
8-bit.
You can't grab by the handle.
Maybe 16.
No, you can. Look. It's got a handle.
Oh my gosh.
That's pretty incredible, Richard.
This was actually my stepfather's that I bought from him. It's got a serial number less than 100 on the back. It's actually I bought it from him because I wanted a word processor. I had the dot matrix printer.
That is awesome.
Do you have Photoshop on there?
No, I have. He has Excel. Right? He has Excel. Look, I even got the mouse.
Oh my gosh! I used to have one of those mice.
One button.
I used to have
one. It's incredible.
Yeah. That is great.
I had a mouse like that, but I only had terminal at the time. I didn't have a GUI. Yeah,
you also had this. So if you need to do this legacy codecs, keep a legacy machine for yourself. Obviously, this is just I'm not saying keep this one because this does. I don't think this runs Final Cut, does it, Patrick?
I think it might run a really, really early version of Excel, and that's about it, right? I think that's what we've determined.
Isn't it? It'll run
only
Paint,
comment
right?
on what's known, not the unknown.
Oh, does it have Paint? It probably has Paint. Does wait.
Yeah, it does.
Hold on. If you really want to get into storytelling on that machine, that's what Oregon Trail is for, I think.
There you go.
Right on.
Oh my goodness.
You've died from dysentery.
You can
No,
code
man.
your own little movie and storyboard.
Oh
You know,
gosh.
one of the most aggravating things about that Macintosh that I forgot is you got to hold the mouse button down in order to go through the menus. They don't just click open.
Oh,
You have
good
to
grief.
hold the mouse button down and then drag down to your selection.
That's
But
frustrating.
anyway, I have an old MacBook Pro that I have that I'm not going to update to anything current. So that'll be open up these legacy projects. I also have a Mac Pro downstairs in my studio that is not going to be updated. So those two machines, I'll be able to, if I run into a problem, I'll be able to, you know, go ahead and transcode with them. Now, the question I have, maybe Isaac or somebody knows, so is it possible when this OS comes out that only runs 64-bit apps, is it possible for an app to load these 32-bit codecs and transcode them inside of a 64-bit app?
Well, I mean, if you know what we're seeing from these dialogues is I don't think they'd want to do that. And you might be talking about something akin to what they did when they transitioned from like PowerPC to Intel and had like that Rosetta layer.
Well, maybe
running-
no, not
running
even
in the
that, but a
background.
third party app.
Yeah, you know
Yeah.
that article, that Digital Rebellion piece, John Chappell's piece, talks about if someone wanted to write their own parser, they could do that.
Okay.
They could do that, but you know, then you know, and it's funny because the way it's written, you know, and he said it on Twitter too. It's like this was supposed to be kind of like an unrolled thread on Twitter, and I decided to make it, you know, one article. But you know, he kind of goes back and forth on how that in the article and how it might be attacked. So that might be part of what might be causing some reader confusion there too. But yeah, it's possible using, say, FFmpeg for sure. You know,
That's what I was wondering. So
do
is FFmpeg, is that 64-bit?
Yeah. I mean, that's a big monster, you know, code decode project for audio and video.
So if somebody had hundreds of libraries, or even not if they're using Avid and they have media, it seems like even with the next 2019 Mac OS that just does 64-bit, that an app could still load those legacy codecs and output something else. Is that possible? That's what you're saying, right? Like,
If a vendor, what that article seems to suggest, and I'm not going to be dogmatic because that's unknown, but it's like what that article seems to suggest is that if a vendor chose to tackle that and use, say, FFmpeg as the core,
I see.
that would be possible. Whether they want to do that, whether that's viable, or whether they choose to do that is another story. But I don't.
Right.
Again, that's unknown. You know.
Completely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I would not even take the chance because it is unknown. Like, we've got the warning now.
Exactly. That's exactly
practically right. You should go through your projects. If you've got any of those 32-bit codecs lying around, if you've got any HD CAMSR for whatever reason, you should probably go in and export, you know, ProRes versions of it. Gentlemen, I'm going to have to scoot.
That was going to be mine too. Thank you so much for having me, Richard.
Yeah,
absolutely, Isaac.
You guys.
Learned a lot.
Great having you on. I wanted technical people that knew some stuff.
They know things. I'm just here. I'm the Matt Damon of the show.
Well, here's the thing. The legacy codec, one of the things that's missing in that article is a list of what legacy codecs are. So that's one of the things we really need is some kind of a list where people can go and look. And then people are complaining they have too much material to go through. They can't go through it. Well, keep a boot of your current one that you can boot into. Keep legacy, machine, a Mac around, that in case you run into it in the future, you can take care of it. And there might be something, you know, going on even when the OS is there.
Well, and my final note on that is that in that article, there's also a link, and I'm sure that it'll be continually updated on not only cameras but media formats. And when you tap on that, you get containers and codecs that are supported, and I'm sure that will be updated as time goes on.
Absolutely.
Hey, thank you so much, Richard. Brad.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You bet. Have a good day.
Thanks, Isaac. Talk to you later.
Take care.
All right, Brad, we're holding up the fort for another minute or two. So are you concerned about legacy? I mean, I have some old stuff. I don't know if it's going to transcode, but like I said, I've got my old machines. I can always open it up. I had to. Do you have anything you're worried about as far as legacy goes?
Not really. I mean, I maybe check back with me in a year and maybe I'll be kicking and screaming that something I didn't realize wasn't going to be supported isn't supported. But I'm actually trading in my current MacBook Pro, which is a 13-inch, and my 2013 Mac Pro. In the next couple of days, I've already got a 2018 MacBook Pro on order. I've got a new Mac Mini. So I'm just like cutting everything and moving to the future and just blindly hoping that this doesn't hurt me. But I haven't used any Cinepak. I haven't used any HDCam SR. I haven't used any Avid codecs. If they drop support for JPEG 2000, then DCPs might become an issue. But so far, I haven't heard any word on that officially, other than you just pulling that up as a legacy format.
Right.
But
and you still have a Mac Pro, right?
Well, I'm trading it in. I'm trading in my Mac Pro and my MacBook Pro. So I'm not keeping an old computer around. But
well, you're going to know somebody that has one in case I have a couple.
Okay, you have the old silver ones. So
I have I have two cheese graters, an Intel and actually a PowerPC one.
Was it the G5?
G5. Exactly.
Yeah.
Plus, I have a MacBook Pro that's really old too.
But so. I have a bunch of Final Cut Pro 7 projects that are short films and projects I did for clients 10 years ago that I can't open up now, but it's really not a big deal to me. I can access that media if I need to, but I'm more interested in what I'm doing next and not very interested in what I've done before.
Well, the thing is, I understand
that's not true for everyone else, but that's
exactly. That's what I'm saying. So the thing is, I think Apple can, there's still going to be updates to that article probably, and there's going to be updates, maybe a legacy codec list that will be growing or whatever, but you still have a year. Clone your hard drive, what you're doing now. I mean, these are some suggestions. They might not work for 100% for everybody, but they certainly will work in a lot of cases. So I'm not sure what else they can do. So 64-bit update is coming. That's not a question of if. It's definitely coming, and you can either do nothing, you can prepare for it, you can complain about it, or both prepare and complain. One of those things. But if
I'm the changes radical guy, so don't complain to me.
If you just complain and do nothing about preparing for it, I don't know what to tell you. So but anyway, I suspect that it'll work out as it, just like the floppy drive missing from the iMac did. People complained about that forever. How can they dare drop the floppy drive? Well, they did, and it worked out fine. We'll come back if there's any updates on this information at some point, and we're probably going to have a Final Cut Pro Xmas. Was it Patrick or you that said that?
I was talking about that. The FCP Xmas party.
We'll probably have one of these live events prior to Christmas to get everybody together, get it, in the Final Cut Pro community and outside. And we will, of course, let everybody know at that point. You can comment. People have been commenting in the chat. And we will see you all later. I'm glad that everybody joined in. We will, if we get any more information about this legacy codec, I'll come back on live. So Post Professionals, Robin S. Kurz says it all ultimately boils down to licensing terms, conditions, and the likes. That's absolutely true. No matter what Apple does, they're not going to please everybody. They never do. But I don't want them just to ignore people either. That article, for example, doesn't take into account people that use media outside of Final Cut, Premiere users and Avid users that might run into this problem. So hopefully we'll get that clarified at some point going forward. So Rob Mills says, thanks, guys. Very interesting as always. We will be back in December, if not sooner. And thanks, everybody, for stopping in and chatting. See you all later. Brad, you can hang on for just a second.
Okay.